The night was heavy with storms, the wind howling like a beast across the jagged cliffs of the kingdom. Rain pelted the forest floor in a relentless rhythm, turning the earth to mud and hiding the secrets of the shadows. Among the ancient trees, 3 small figures ran, their clothes torn and soaked, their breaths coming in short, frightened gasps. The eldest, a girl with sharp eyes and a defiant jaw, led the way. Her name was Lyra, and even in the darkest moment, she carried a spark of fire that refused to be extinguished. Behind her stumbled Kieran, a boy no older than 12, whose courage often outweighed his wisdom. At the back, silent and cautious, moved Mira, a small girl with a quiet presence that somehow felt heavier than her fragile frame. She carried a strange calm, as if she understood dangers that others could not see. "Keep moving!" Lyra hissed, pulling her soaked cloak tighter around her shoulders. "We can't stop! They'll catch us!" The bandits had been relentless, shadows among shadows, their voices echoing like snarls through the forest. The children's parents had vanished long ago in a raid, leaving them to fend for themselves. Now, faced with cruel men seeking anything they could steal, they were running for their lives. Suddenly, a loud crack split the night, a tree falling under the storm's fury. The children stumbled, and Lyra fell face first into the mud. Kieran and Mira froze, their hearts hammering, but then a figure emerged from the rain. Tall, broad-shouldered, and cloaked in darkness, he seemed to belong to the storm itself. Lightning flashed, revealing a sharp face framed by black hair, and eyes that glimmered with an almost unnatural intensity. The bandits stopped mid-chase, their confidence faltering as the stranger stepped forward. He carried no weapon at first, but the aura around him made even the bravest shiver. Then, with a flick of his hand, a low hum of energy crackled, and the bandits stumbled back, fear overtaking their greed. "I said, leave them," the man said, his voice deep, commanding and calm. The bandits looked at each other, then fled into the night, disappearing as quickly as they had come. The rain beat down harder, but in the presence of the stranger, it felt almost sacred, as if the storm itself bowed to him. Lyra scrambled to her feet, mud dripping from her hair and cheeks. She stared at him, eyes wide. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I am the king," he said simply, with a weight in his words that made even Kieran gulp. "And you are coming with me." The children hesitated. They had heard stories of the Alpha King, a ruler feared and respected across lands, a man whose power was said to be unmatched, whose presence alone could bend men to his will. To be chosen by him was both a gift and a burden. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "Why us? We're just children. We have nothing." The king's gaze softened, ever so slightly, but it did not lose its power. "You have survived. That is more than many do. And I see something in you that I cannot ignore." The 3 children had no choice. They followed him through the storm, their steps uncertain, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and wonder. The castle rose from the cliffs like a shadow itself, jagged spires reaching into the stormy sky. Thunder rolled as if warning the world of the power contained within. The children's mouths fell open at the sight. They had never seen such grandeur, nor imagined a place so forbidding and yet alive with unseen energy. Inside, the castle was warmer than the storm, but no less imposing. The walls were lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles, kings, and warriors long gone. Torches flickered along the corridors, casting dancing shadows that seemed to watch the newcomers with silent curiosity. The king led them to a great hall, where the air smelled of cedar and smoke. He gestured to the 3 children. "You will eat, dry yourselves, and rest. Tomorrow we begin." Lyra looked at him, suspicion sharp in her eyes. "Rest? You saved us, and now you want something from us?" The king's expression remained unreadable, yet his voice carried a rare gentleness. "I saved you, because the night is cruel, but I do not offer you mere safety. I offer a place where you can become more than what the world has made of you. You may choose to accept it, or you may leave." The children exchanged glances. The thought of leaving in the middle of a storm alone was unthinkable, and so, reluctantly, they agreed. Over the next days, the children explored the castle under the king's watchful gaze. They trained, not with weapons yet, but in the ways of observation and survival. The king taught them to read the shadows, to listen to the wind, to sense danger before it arrived. Lyra's sharp mind learned quickly. She discovered the secret corridors, the hidden passages, and the traps meant to protect the castle from intruders. Kieran, though less clever, had a bold heart that drove him to practice endurance and courage under the king's careful supervision. Mira, quiet as she was, revealed an uncanny ability to sense emotions, fear, anger, even sorrow, in ways that unsettled everyone but intrigued the king. Despite their progress, trust did not come easily. The king was distant, a figure of authority who rarely smiled and spoke even less of his own life. Yet, there were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, when he would pause and watch them with something almost tender. A glance that lingered too long, a hand brushing hair away from Lyra's face during training, a soft word to soothe Kieran's frustration. Moments that made the children wonder about the man behind the mask of power. One evening, as the storm outside raged, Lyra found herself on the balcony overlooking the cliffs. Rain drenched her, but she did not care. The wind whispered secrets she could not quite understand. "You watch the night as if it holds your answers," the king's voice said from behind her. She turned, startled, and found him standing there, cloak dripping with rain, eyes dark and stormy as the sky. I don't know," she admitted. "Everything is so strange here. I feel safe, yet I feel afraid. I don't know how to feel." The king studied her, and for the first time he spoke not as a ruler, but as a man who had carried his own fears alone for years. "It is not strange to feel both. Courage is not the absence of fear, Lyra. It is the choice to face it, even when the world seems against you. You have already shown me that you have courage." Lyra swallowed, her heart beating fast. The words struck something deep inside her, a mixture of fear, respect, and something she could not yet name. Days turned into weeks. The children began to settle into their new lives, slowly shedding the weight of the streets and the fear that had defined them. Yet, the shadows of their past were never far. Dreams haunted them, visions of the parents they had lost, faces of those who had hurt them, whispers that told them the world was cruel and untrustworthy. The king sensed this, though he did not always intervene. He believed that strength was forged through challenge, that bonds were tested by hardship. And yet each night he would walk the halls alone, hearing the soft breathing of the children as they slept. He wondered how they would grow, how they would fight, how they would come to understand the power he had offered them. One night, as lightning split the sky and thunder shook the walls, a shadow moved outside the castle gates. The king's eyes narrowed. He had sensed it before any alarm was raised, the faint, almost imperceptible shift in the air that spoke of a threat from the past. The three children, unaware of the danger, huddled near the fire in the great hall. Lyra told stories to distract Kieran and Mira from the storm outside, but the sound of the wind and the occasional crash of lightning made their hearts beat faster. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the outer courtyard. The children froze. The king appeared in the doorway, his cloak billowing, eyes sharp and dangerous. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice low and resolute. "Do not move." Lyra's heart pounded. "What is it? Who's there?" "Shadows from my past," he said simply, his jaw tightening. "A threat I thought long gone has returned, and it will not wait for mercy." Before anyone could ask more, the castle shook as if the storm itself had entered. Doors rattled, windows cracked, and then a scream echoed from the courtyard. The king's eyes darkened with a mixture of rage and fear. He turned to the children, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. "I cannot protect you if you stay in fear. But you must trust me, and trust each other." Lyra, Kieran, and Mira exchanged glances. Fear gripped them, but beneath it, something new stirred, a willingness to stand, to fight, to follow the man who had saved them, who had given them hope when the world had none. Lightning flashed, illuminating the king's determined face, and the children realized the truth. Their lives had changed forever. The storm was only the beginning. Cliffhanger. From the shadows, a dark figure moved closer to the castle walls, unseen but relentless. One of the children, drawn by curiosity, stepped too close to the edge of the courtyard and vanished in a flash of shadow. The king's roar of fury shook the night, and the remaining two children were left staring at the darkness, their hearts filled with dread. The storm had passed, leaving the world soaked and heavy with the scent of wet earth. The castle, though damaged at its outer walls, stood firm like a sentinel against the night. Inside, the tension was palpable. The king had rescued two of the children, but one, Mira, had been taken by the dark figure that had breached the castle. The corridors were silent, the usual crackle of torches somehow muted, as if the castle itself held its breath. Lyra and Kieran huddled in the great hall, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Lyra's hands trembled as she gripped the hilt of a training dagger she had barely learned to wield. Kieran paced, his small frame taut with energy he did not know how to release. "She's gone," Kieran whispered, his voice breaking. She's gone." Lyra shook her head, forcing herself to stay calm. "No," she said firmly. "She's not gone. We have to trust him. We have to trust the king." The king entered the hall then, his cloak still wet, hair plastered to his face, eyes stormy and unreadable. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he surveyed the children, his gaze heavy with unspoken thoughts. "You have grown since you came here," he said at last. His voice was low, resonant, carrying authority and care at the same time. "Fear is natural, but it cannot rule you. You must learn to control it, or it will consume you." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Then teach us. We want to help. We want to save her." The king's eyes softened, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "That is why I chose you. Not just to survive, but to rise. You will learn to fight, to protect, and to see beyond what the eye can perceive. The path will be hard, but it will make you stronger. And perhaps stronger than even I have been." The next morning, the king led the children to a hidden courtyard, one of many secret areas within the castle. The rain had left the stones slick, and the walls glistened in the pale dawn light. "You will begin training here," the king said, "not just with your bodies, but with your minds. Observation, strategy, and trust. These are the weapons of survival. Without them, you will fall." Lyra immediately took to the exercises with a mix of curiosity and determination. Her eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, every crack in the stone. She memorized patterns, trained her reflexes, and began to see the castle as more than walls and towers, as a living entity that could aid or betray her. Kieran, on the other hand, struggled with patience. He was bold, sometimes reckless, but his heart was pure. The king guided him gently, showing him how to channel his courage into action, how to listen to his instincts without being consumed by them. Mira, returned to them in the king's careful rescue, had changed. She had been quiet before, but now her silence carried weight. Her eyes glimmered with a strange light, and she often stood apart, sensing movements before anyone else did, predicting danger, and pointing out details that even the king himself had missed. Magic is not always loud, the king told her one evening. Sometimes it is a whisper. Listen, and you will hear it. Mira nodded, unsure at first, but slowly she began to trust the instinct that had always been part of her. The king watched her from a distance, noting the faint glow that sometimes surrounded her hands, the way her presence seemed to shift the air around her. He did not speak of it, but inside, he wondered if this child might hold a power that could rival even his own. Days turned into weeks. The children's skills grew under the king's guidance, and so did their bond with him. They learned to move silently through the corridors, to recognize the patterns of guards and intruders alike, and to anticipate threats before they struck. Yet, it was not only the skills that grew. There was a quiet shift in their hearts, a growing understanding of the man who had saved them. The king was more than fearsome power and strict discipline. He had a depth of sadness, a loneliness that the children glimpsed in fleeting moments, a hand resting lightly on a torch-lit wall, a sigh as he gazed out at the stormy cliffs, a quiet glance that lingered longer than necessary. Lyra found herself drawn to him, though she did not understand why. She saw the weight he carried, the burdens of a king who had lost much and feared losing more. In her heart, a strange mixture of awe, respect, and something softer began to grow. Kieran, too, felt it in his way, a desire to prove himself worthy of the man who had taken them in, to earn not only his trust, but his approval. One evening, as twilight painted the castle in shades of violet and silver, the king summoned them to the highest tower. The wind howled, tugging at their cloaks, and the lights of the distant village flickered like tiny stars against the darkness. "There is a darkness returning," the king said, his voice calm but heavy. "One I thought long gone. It moves against the kingdom and against us, and it will not wait." Lyra's heart thumped. "Is it the same shadow that took Mira before?" The king nodded. "Yes, it comes not just for me but for all those I protect. And now, it tests you as well." He handed each child a small curved blade, not sharp enough to kill, but heavy enough to teach balance, control, and precision. "You will train with these. Trust your instincts. Trust each other. Trust yourself." For hours they practiced in the tower, under the king's watchful eyes. The wind lashed against the stone, the sky dark with clouds, and the castle seemed alive with every gust and echo. Lyra moved with precision, Kieran with boldness, and Mira with an almost unnatural grace. The king watched silently, proud but cautious. He knew the true test was not skill alone. It was trust, loyalty, and the courage to face a darkness that threatened more than just their lives. Night came, and the castle fell into uneasy quiet. The children retired to their chambers, but sleep did not come easily. Lyra's mind raced with thoughts of the shadow, of Mira's capture, and of the strange, powerful man who had taken them in. Kieran sat by the window, looking out at the cliffs below. "Do you think we can really fight it?" he asked quietly. Lyra put a hand on his shoulder. "We have to. And we're not alone. The king, he believes in us. And if we believe in each other, maybe we can survive anything." Outside, the wind whispered through the towers, carrying hints of movement, shadows sliding along the stone walls. The children did not notice them yet, but the king had. He stood in the hall beyond, listening, waiting, and preparing for the storm he knew was coming. The next day, the king led the children into the forest beyond the castle. The air was thick with mist, and the trees seemed to lean closer as if listening. This was no ordinary training. The forest was enchanted, alive with magic both subtle and dangerous. "You must learn to see what others cannot," the king said. "The forest will test your courage, your senses, and your trust. You will face illusions, and sometimes your own fears will become real. Do not turn away. Do not hesitate. Do not run." Lyra, Kieran, and Mira nodded, gripping their training blades tightly. The forest was alive with whispers, shadows shifting and dancing just at the edge of vision. A sudden movement, a rustle in the underbrush, and the children froze. The king's presence was steady behind them, a silent anchor. Then a figure emerged, not the shadow that had taken Mira, but a projection of fear itself. It took the shape of their parents, their faces twisted in sorrow and accusation. Lyra's heart pounded. She could feel the memories of loss pressing down, threatening to break her focus. "Focus!" the king barked. His voice cut through the illusion like a sword. "This is not real. What is real is here, in front of you. Trust yourselves. Trust each other." Lyra closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and stepped forward. Kieran followed, then Mira. Together they pushed through the illusions, their blades slicing through the shadows, their hearts beating in unison. When they opened their eyes, the forest was calm again. The illusions vanished, and the king's proud gaze rested on them. "You are ready," he said quietly, a rare softness in his voice. "But the true test has yet to come. The darkness is patient, and it will not wait." That night, as the children slept, the king stood atop the highest tower, looking out over the cliffs and the distant village. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, a mask of strength and unspoken sorrow. He thought of the shadow, of the threats yet unseen, and of the children who had become more than wards. They were now his allies, his protectors, and perhaps in ways he did not fully admit, his hope. A movement flickered in the darkness below. The shadow had returned, bolder than before. The storm inside the castle had passed, but a storm beyond, far darker, was rising. Cliffhanger. The shadow struck again, silently and swiftly, breaching the outer defenses. This time it did not flee. The castle walls trembled as the children were forced to confront their first true battle, not just against the shadow, but against the fear inside themselves. The king's roar echoed through the night, and the children realized that the fight for their home, their family, and their future had truly begun. The castle trembled under the weight of approaching darkness. Shadows stretched long across the halls, moving with a purpose, alive in ways the children had never seen. The king stood at the heart of the fortress, his cloak flowing, eyes narrowed, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to strike. Behind him, Lyra, Kieran, and Mira readied themselves, their blades in hand, hearts steady despite the fear that gripped the walls like a living thing. "This is it," the king said, his voice low but resolute. "The darkness returns. It seeks to destroy what I have protected, and test the strength within you. Remember everything you have learned. Trust yourselves. Trust each other." The children nodded, their courage tempered by weeks of training, observation, and trust in the king. They were no longer the frightened orphans who had run through the stormy forest. They were his allies, his protectors, and, in ways they did not yet fully understand, extensions of his own strength. The first wave of shadows hit suddenly, slamming against the outer gates like living storms. Dark forms poured into the castle courtyard, twisting shapes that moved with uncanny speed and strength. The torches flickered and dimmed as the shadows pressed closer, and the air grew thick with tension and the smell of ozone. Lyra stepped forward, her blade held high. "We fight together!" she shouted. Kieran and Mira flanked her, forming a tight triangle, their eyes scanning the darkness for weaknesses. The shadows attacked with ferocity, striking at the gates, the walls, and anyone who dared approach. The king moved like a storm himself, each motion precise, controlled, yet terrifyingly powerful. His presence seemed to bend the shadows, slowing their advance, even as more emerged from the mist. Lyra lunged at a shadow that surged toward her, remembering the lessons the king had taught her. Observe, anticipate, and act. Her blade cut through the illusion, which dissipated into nothingness, revealing the shadow's true form, a creature made of darkness and malice, screaming silently as it dissolved. Kieran followed, his courage blazing as he faced a larger shadow. His movements were bold, sometimes clumsy, but the king's earlier training had taught him to channel his fear into action. With a swift strike, he struck the creature, and it fell, disappearing into the night. Mira, quiet and focused, moved almost unseen. Her small frame belied the power she now wielded. She sensed the shifts in the shadows, feeling their intent before they acted. Her hands glowed faintly, a light that seemed to burn through the darkness, guiding her strikes with unerring precision. The king watched them, a flicker of pride in his eyes. He had chosen them not just for survival, but for the potential he had seen. Courage, cunning, and strength beyond their years. And now, in the crucible of battle, they were proving themselves. But the shadows were not finished. From the deepest corners of the courtyard, a darker, more formidable presence emerged. The entity that had first taken Mira, now fully realized in a form of pure shadow and malice. Its eyes glimmered with hatred, its form shifting like liquid darkness, and its power pulsed like a living heartbeat. The king's gaze hardened. "This is the true darkness," he said. "Face it, or be consumed." The children froze for a moment, the weight of the threat pressing down like the storm had months ago. Fear rose, but they remembered the lessons the king had taught. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Lyra took a deep breath. "We are not afraid!" she shouted, and she stepped forward, Kieran and Mira at her sides. Together they advanced, forming a united front against the impossible shadow. The battle was fierce. The shadow struck at them with relentless force, testing every skill they had learned. Lyra's sharp mind allowed her to anticipate its strikes. Kieran's boldness kept him in constant motion, and Mira's quiet power disrupted the creature's balance. The king moved among them, guiding, protecting, and striking with devastating precision. At one point, the shadow struck Kieran with a force that sent him sprawling. Lyra cried out, rushing to him, while Mira's hands flared with light to shield them. The king arrived, his eyes blazing, and with a single sweep of his arm, he sent the shadow recoiling. "You must fight together," he roared. "Alone, you cannot prevail." It was then that the children realized the truth. Their strength was not just in themselves, but in each other, and in their bond with the king. Trust, loyalty, and courage became their weapons, stronger than any blade or magic. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The battle raged across the courtyard, shadows striking, dissipating, and reforming. Lyra's muscles ached. Kieran's chest burned with exertion, and Mira's hands glowed brighter than ever, draining her energy. Yet, they did not falter. Finally, the king saw the opening. He gestured to the children. "Now, strike together." With a single coordinated effort, Lyra, Kieran, and Mira attacked. Lyra's blade cut across the shadow's midsection, Kieran struck from above, and Mira's light flared, piercing the darkness with a brilliance that left even the king momentarily blinded. The shadow screamed, twisting, shrinking, and finally collapsing into a harmless swirl of smoke that dissipated into the night. Silence fell. The wind ceased its howling. The castle stood battered, but unbroken. The children stared at each other, their hearts still racing, and then at the king, who approached with slow, steady steps. "You did it," he said, his voice almost soft now. "You faced the darkness and did not falter. You have become what I hoped you could be, my protectors not just of the castle but of each other and of me." Lyra, exhausted, sank to her knees. We did it together," she whispered. The king's eyes softened, and he knelt beside her. "Yes, together." Kieran and Mira joined them, forming a small circle in the courtyard. The storm had passed, leaving the night quiet and filled with stars. For the first time, the children felt a sense of belonging, of family, of purpose. That night, in the quiet aftermath, the king walked the children to their chambers. "You have proven yourselves," he said, "but remember, strength is not only in battle. It is in the heart, in the courage to trust, to forgive, and to hope. You have taken the first steps, but the path ahead is long." Lyra looked up at him. "Do you trust us?" The king paused. The weight of his past, the shadows of mistakes and regrets, hung heavy in his eyes. Then he nodded. "I trust you with my life, as I hope you will trust yourselves. You have become my fiercest protectors, not because of your skill alone, but because of your loyalty, courage, and the strength of your hearts." Kieran grinned, tired but proud. "Then we will never fail you." Mira, quiet as always, simply nodded, her eyes reflecting both her own power and the unspoken bond that had grown between them. In the following days, life in the castle returned to a new normal. Training continued, but now it was tempered with a sense of purpose and unity. The children were no longer wards. They were partners in a way, each contributing their strength, courage, and skill to the protection of the castle and the king they had come to respect and admire. The king, in turn, allowed himself moments of vulnerability, small gestures, quiet words, and a presence that showed he cared deeply for the children, not only as protector and ward, but as a family. The bond between them grew stronger, built not just on power or duty, but on trust, loyalty, and love, the kind that is forged in trials, tempered by fear, and strengthened by hope. One evening, as the sun set behind the cliffs, casting golden light across the castle walls, the king gathered the children on the balcony. The wind was gentle now, carrying the scent of the forest below. "You have grown," he said quietly, watching the horizon, "not just in skill, but in heart. You are no longer orphans in need of protection. You are my fiercest protectors, and the kingdom itself is stronger because of you." Lyra smiled, a mixture of pride and affection shining in her eyes. "We will always stand by you," she said, her voice steady. Kieran grinned, fists clenched with determination. "No matter what comes, we fight together." Mira, silent but resolute, simply raised her hand, a small glow forming as if sealing a promise. The king looked at them, and for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to feel a rare warmth, hope, pride, and the beginnings of something more, something he had thought lost to him forever. As night fell and the stars emerged, the castle stood tall against the sky, a symbol of strength, unity, and courage. The shadows had been defeated, but the world remained dangerous. Yet with the king and his 3 protectors, there was hope. The children had faced their fears, discovered their power, and learned the true meaning of loyalty. They had become more than survivors. They had become a family, fierce and unbreakable.